Nicholas Brendon, the actor who became a defining face of late 90s television as Xander Harris on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, has died at the age of 54, and the news has landed with a kind of emotional weight that's hard to ignore. For many people, this isn't just another celebrity passing. It feels like losing someone who was part of their everyday life, someone who existed in their living rooms week after week, growing up alongside them. It feels like losing a familiar voice, a presence that was always there during a very specific time in life, a time when television wasn't just entertainment, but an experience you shared with friends, with family, or even alone, finding comfort in stories that somehow understood you. The announcement came quietly, without build-up, without warning. His family confirmed that he passed away peacefully in his sleep. No dramatic final moments, no long goodbye, just a sudden end that has left fans, friends, and former co-stars trying to process what this loss really means. There's something especially haunting about that kind of silence, about a life that once felt so loud, so full of energy and expression, ending in such a quiet way. It leaves behind questions, reflections, and an overwhelming sense of pause. Because Nicholas Brendon wasn't just an actor who played a role, he was part of a cultural moment that shaped an entire generation. He was part of a show that didn't just entertain, it spoke to people. It helped them navigate emotions they didn't yet understand, gave them characters they could relate to, and created a universe that felt strangely real, even with all its supernatural elements. To really understand the impact of his passing, you have to go back to where it all began. In 1997, Buffy the Vampire Slayer premiered and quickly carved out its place in television history. It wasn't just a show about vampires and monsters, it was about growing up, about identity, about fear, love, friendship, and finding your place in a world that often feels overwhelming. It was about the awkwardness of high school, the uncertainty of adulthood, and the emotional battles that feel just as intense as any supernatural threat. And right in the center of that world was Xander Harris. He wasn't the chosen one, he wasn't the powerful witch, he didn't have supernatural strength or ancient destiny. He was just human. And that's exactly why he mattered. Because in a world filled with extraordinary characters, Xander represented the audience. He was the lens through which many people saw themselves. He was flawed, sometimes unsure, sometimes impulsive, sometimes making mistakes, but always trying, always showing up, always caring, even when it wasn't easy. And Nicholas Brendon brought Xander to life with a kind of natural charm that made him instantly relatable. He was funny, often awkward, sometimes insecure, occasionally reckless, but always loyal. He was the friend who stuck around even when things got dangerous, the one who made jokes when everything felt too heavy, the one who showed up even when he didn't feel like he belonged. And that feeling of not quite belonging is something so many people understand. That kind of character doesn't just entertain people, it connects with them on a deeper level. It becomes part of their emotional memory. It becomes something they carry with them long after the show ends. And Nicholas Brendon understood that. His performance wasn't about being the strongest or the coolest person in the room. It was about being real, about showing that you don't have to be extraordinary to be important, that your presence, your loyalty, your humanity, that's enough. For years, fans watched Xander grow from a sarcastic high school kid into someone more complex, more layered, someone who carried emotional weight in ways that weren't always obvious. His storylines touched on insecurity, heartbreak, responsibility, and self-worth. He wasn't perfect, and that imperfection made him feel even more authentic. And through it all, Brendon's performance remained grounded, human, and deeply sincere. But while audiences were watching that evolution on screen, his life off-screen was far more complicated. Nicholas Brendon's journey wasn't smooth, it wasn't polished, it wasn't the kind of story that fits neatly into a success narrative. In many ways, it was the opposite, a story filled with challenges, setbacks, and constant attempts to find balance in a world that doesn't always make that easy. He struggled, openly, publicly, and often painfully. He dealt with depression, something that many people experience but few talk about openly, especially at the level of visibility he had. He battled addiction, facing cycles that are difficult to break and even harder to explain to those who haven't lived through them. He faced legal issues that brought him into headlines for reasons that had nothing to do with his talent or his work. And in a world where public figures are often judged harshly, those struggles became part of how people saw him. But what made his story different was that he didn't hide from it. He talked about it. He admitted his mistakes. He acknowledged his setbacks. And more importantly, he kept trying. There's something incredibly human about that, about someone who doesn't pretend to have it all together, who doesn't package their life into a perfect image, but instead shows the reality of what it means to struggle and still move forward. He entered rehabilitation programs multiple times, not because he failed, but because he refused to give up. Each attempt was another step, another effort to find stability, to find peace. And even when progress wasn't linear, even when setbacks happened, the effort itself mattered. And while those efforts weren't always successful in the way people expect, they were real. They mattered. Another powerful part of his story is something that many people might not even know. Nicholas Brendon grew up with a stutter, and that detail changes everything. Because when you think about his career, about the fast-paced dialogue, the comedic timing, the confidence it takes to perform in front of cameras, you realize just how much he had to overcome. Imagine being someone who struggles to speak, who fears being judged or misunderstood, and then choosing a path where your voice becomes your identity. That's not just bravery, that's transformation. He didn't just overcome that challenge, he used it to help others. He became an advocate, speaking openly about his experiences, encouraging people who felt limited by their own struggles, showing them that those limitations don't have to define their future. He turned something that once held him back into something that could lift others up. And for many fans, that part of his life was just as impactful as anything he did on screen, because it was real. In later years, something seemed to shift in his life. There was a quieter side that began to emerge, one that wasn't focused on Hollywood or public attention. The spotlight, which once defined so much of his identity, seemed to fade into the background as he explored something more personal. He found a new outlet in art, particularly painting. It became more than just a creative hobby. It became a form of expression, a way to communicate emotions that words couldn't always capture. His family described his artwork as deeply personal, as a reflection of who he truly was beneath the surface. And maybe that's where he found a kind of peace that had been difficult to achieve elsewhere. It's often said that artists find ways to communicate what they can't say directly, and for Nicholas Brendon, that seemed to be true. His art wasn't about performance, it was about honesty. It was about expression without expectation. As news of his passing spread, the reaction was immediate and deeply emotional. Fans began sharing clips, favorite scenes, quotes, and personal memories. Social media filled with messages from people who felt like they had lost a friend, even if they had never met them. People talked about watching Buffy during difficult times in their lives, about how Xander's humor helped them cope, about how his vulnerability made them feel understood. That's the kind of impact that can't be measured in awards or accolades. That's connection. That's legacy. His co-stars, many of whom had shared years of their lives working alongside him, also began to speak out. Their messages carried a different kind of weight, one that comes from knowing someone beyond the screen. There was warmth, there was nostalgia, and there was a deep sense of loss. Because they weren't just cast members, they were part of something that mattered. They created a world that people still return to decades later, a world that continues to resonate with new audiences, a world that feels timeless. And Nicholas Brendon was a key part of that. There's something particularly poignant about losing someone who represented the everyman in a story, because Xander Harris wasn't the hero in the traditional sense. He didn't have powers, he didn't have destiny, he didn't have a grand arc that made him larger than life. He had something else. He had heart. He had loyalty. He had the ability to stand beside people who were stronger, braver, more powerful, and still matter just as much. And that message, whether intentional or not, is one that stays with people. It tells them that they don't have to be extraordinary to be valuable, that showing up is enough, that being there for others is enough, that being human is enough. And maybe that's why this loss feels so personal, because it's not just about losing an actor, it's about losing someone who represented something meaningful. Nicholas Brendon's life wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in a world where so much feels curated and filtered, there's something powerful about that kind of authenticity. He experienced success. He experienced struggle. He experienced moments of connection and moments of isolation. He experienced the highs and lows of being human. And through it all, he kept going. As fans revisit Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there's a renewed appreciation for what he brought to the show. Watch any scene with Xander and you'll see it. The timing, the emotion, the subtlety. The way he could shift from humor to sincerity in a matter of seconds. The way he could ground even the most fantastical moments in something relatable. That's not something that can be taught easily. That's something that comes from understanding people, from understanding emotion, from understanding yourself. And Nicholas Brendon had that. His passing also brings up a larger conversation about how we view people in the public eye. It's easy to reduce someone to headlines, to moments, to mistakes, but a life is never just one thing. It's a collection of experiences, choices, challenges, and growth. And if there's anything to take away from Nicholas Brendon's story, it's that complexity matters. People are more than their worst moments. They're more than their struggles. They're more than the roles they play. They're everything in between. As the world reflects on his life, there's a mix of emotions: sadness, nostalgia, gratitude, and perhaps even a sense of perspective, because moments like this remind people of something important: that time moves quickly, that the things we grow up with don't last forever, that the people who shape our memories won't always be here, but the impact they leave behind, that stays. Nicholas Brendon leaves behind more than just a body of work. He leaves behind moments, laughter, emotion, connection. He leaves behind a character who made people feel less alone. And that's something that doesn't fade. It doesn't disappear. It continues. In reruns, in conversations, in memories, in the quiet recognition that sometimes the most powerful characters aren't the ones with superpowers. They're the ones who remind us what it means to be human. Nicholas Brendon did that, on screen, and in his own complicated, honest, imperfect way off-screen too. And that's how he will be remembered. Make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more celebrity updates just like this.